We have Fabiano Caruana entering into the premises. He is taking on none other than Praggnanandhaa at the quarterfinals of the Las Vegas Freestyle Chess 2025. Fabi won one game in the classical format, Pragg won the other. Then in the rapid, they also exchanged wins, and now it's time for Blitz. 5 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. Let's have a look at the position. You have a rook here, queen, king, bishop, rook, knight, bishop, knight. Very different from the traditional position, and it's going to be very exciting. The game is going to be intense, and whoever wins this will have a great chance of winning this quarterfinal battle. The handshake is done, and this, dear friends, is the ambit recap of the day. Fabi opens the game with 1 e4, and Pragg responds back with e5. The knight comes out to g3, and the knight is looking at this very nice square to attack the pawn on g7. Praggnanandhaa pauses a bit. He's thinking whether it's worth it to play his pawn to g6 to stop the knight. Well, it's not. He goes f6, a good move, opening up the bishop. Fabi plays pawn to c3, getting his queen out, getting his bishop out. And Pragg plays also pawn to c6, f3 played. The bishop opens up. And let's see how Pragg continues. He plays his bishop to b6, offering a trade of bishops. One idea is to take, and push the pawn to a4 to limit the pawn on b6. But he goes knight e3, which also makes a lot of sense. He doesn't trade the bishops. He puts his knight in the center. And now Praggnanandhaa plays queen to c7. The queen moves up. And the idea is at some point to strike in the center with d4. Also, you can prepare long castling here. So Fabi taking his time. Right now, playing d4 isn't feasible. He plays his bishop to b3. And once again, Pragg can take, and go knight e6, and has a very nice position. I would even say black is very comfortable there. You can see how both players have gone for a symmetrical structure. And here, I think Pragg is basically deciding between whether to take this or to block here with knight e6, or there's also knight f7, which is a weirdly possible move. He goes knight e6, the bishop comes up to f2. This is a very slow moving position in the opening, but I like how Fabi is moving faster than Pragg. Knight g6 played. He goes short castle. He goes to the side of the board where there are no worries. The king is safe. Bishop f7 played here by Pragg. He also may want to short castle. Can we go knight to f5? With that, you would be looking at g7. He goes the other knight to f5. There's pressure here. There's pressure here. And he goes short castle. It's called the G side castling here in freestyle chess. And Fabi now deciding how to continue. He goes queen d1. He wants to play d4 here with the support of the knight on f5. Black is thinking now what to do here. What's the move to be played? Praggnanandhaa goes with his knight to f4. In fact, if you look at it, the position is almost symmetrical, like 100%, except the fact that queen moved from here to d1, the black queen moved to c7. I believe it's time to now push the pawn in the center, but maybe it's dangerous because if you play d4, I can take, and then knight takes d4. And if you take knight takes, I take bishop takes, and you can't take with the queen because of check. and you lose the queen. So maybe Fabi wants to play d4, but it's not so simple because of the knight here. Also g3 doesn't make much sense because of knight h3 check, and you lose your very important bishop. So Caruana thinking hard here, how to continue. And maybe a very good decision is to simply play king h1, because then g3 becomes possible. There's no check. Also d4. d4 would be pretty strong there. He goes king h1. Good move by Caruana. But he's now down to 2 minutes 48 seconds. Lower than Pragg on the clock. Praggnanandhaa also has to make a decision here how to continue. One idea is to simply play rook a d8 and then d5. That would be the best move here. And Praggnanandhaa now has roughly 2.5 minutes on the clock. He needs to speed up a bit. They have only played 11 moves, so they are playing quite slowly here. He also goes king h8. Pragg is just playing in a way where he's also super safe. But now I think it's the right time to break in the center with d4. I believe it's a very powerful move that white has. And Fabi has to calculate the possibilities, because after takes, g6, knight moves, you lose the d4 pawn. He does go for it. Wow. He does play it. Pragg takes, pawn takes, and now this is the point. The pawn on d4 is defended by the knight and the queen. So if we kick this knight away, the pawn on d4 would become potentially weak here. Pragg goes g6, a good move. Knight goes to h6, and he takes bishop d4. Wow, this risky chess here by Fabi and also Pragg. But for now, Pragg is a pawn up. Fabi has to prove his compensation. Where is his compensation is the big question. Well, of course, this bishop on b3 is very strong. So you can actually take on f7. Caruana thinking hard about his move. He's gone below 2 minutes on the clock. About where to place his pieces. One idea is to take on f7. There's also this tactical opportunity with knight d5. He goes queen d2, and it's a good move connecting the rooks, and black has to be careful not to get run over by white. Like imagine a place where you go g3 f4. Queen d2. Pragg is taking a lot of time here. Maybe the best move is just bishop b6, putting the bishop back. There's also a5. Fabi has 1 minute 30 seconds. Pragg, who had 2 minutes 6 seconds before this move, now down to 1 minute 27 seconds. He goes bishop e5. This is not a good move because of g3. Kicking the knight away, and somehow there's a lot of traffic jam for black in the center. Knight to g4 attacks the knight here with the bishop and the pawn on f6. And Pragg is kind of left breathless here. There's not much to do. What can he do here? And Pragg, my goodness, he's going below a minute on the clock, and he plays his rook to d8 with 50 seconds. And I believe Pragg is angling for some active counterplay with pawn to d5. Well, Caruana could very well stop this. He can go knight f7, rook f7, g3, knight h3, and then bishop e3 and f4 would be very strong. He goes rook a c1, and the rook stands opposite the queen, so that d5 as a move is not possible. Pragg looking at the clock, getting a bit worried. He still goes d5. Pragg is of the opinion, if I don't explode now, or if I don't do something active, I will be under pressure all throughout. So knight takes, knight to e5. And now, do you take back with the pawn or the queen? Both moves look a tad risky. Takes with the queen, which makes sense, because later you want to bring your queen here and attack that knight on h6. Fabi can go rook fe1. He plays it. Queen f4. This is becoming very intense. I think taking the queen is the best move. Fabi has 44 seconds. Pragg has just 14 seconds. And Caruana just hoping that he can find some tactical way to finish off this game. He takes. Knight takes and bishop to c5, attacking the rook. The rook can't move because of knight f7 check. Knight d3 is really bad because of bishop takes f8. So king g7, he takes on f8, rook f8, knight takes the bishop, rook takes. And truth be told, this position is completely lost for black. Rook c d1, goes rook d7, pawn g3, he goes knight to h3. So king comes up to g2, knight goes to g5, takes, pawn takes, and now the d pawn is isolated. White also is an exchange up, so should be completely winning here. Fabi plays pawn to f4, kicking the knight away. The knight goes back, rook to d3, trying to double the pawn. King, knight h6, he goes here, knight f5, king f3, knight e7, and he's able to save the pawn somehow. b5, king goes to e6, he goes rook c1, and knight to f5 played. He pushes his pawn to a4, and Pragg goes king to d6 now. Pragg is completely losing, but he's hanging in there. He's not rushing it. He's asking Fabi to find the win, because he's actually only a pawn down. I mean, he has a rook and a pawn for knight and a pawn for a rook. King e6, a5. Fabi trying to trick his opponent somehow. Goes rook to e1, rook c7, and now rook e3, check, king back. He takes the pawn, knight jumps into e6, d6, and stops checks here. Rook f8, and he goes d4, rook he gets his rook in, king goes back. Now will Pragg take this pawn on h3? Maybe. He goes knight c4, but Fabi takes the pawn with a check, king d6. Now all eyes on this d pawn. It's a dangerous pawn. He goes rook d1, d3 played, and rook takes b7. He goes knight b2, very important to play king back here. Rook b1 played, and he goes d2, rook b8, and it's a mistake, king c7, rook e8, goes with rook c1, and now Pragg is the one who's winning. b6 check. Pragg mustn't take the pawn. He goes king d7, it's a good move. He pushes his pawn to b7 and makes a queen, but that's a mistake. Check. King comes up and he takes on c1 with a check. And here he takes back. And now there's a fork, but pawn pushed forward. Oh, insane drama. Because after pawn takes pawn, he pushes g5 and the pawn cannot be stopped from queening. The knight is trapped. Praggnanandhaa can't believe this. What happened in the end? Smiles on both the faces of Fabi and Pragg. Insane battle by both these players. They were playing so fast, it was also difficult to keep up with all their moves. But actually, in the end, it's Pragg who loses this critical game. He now needs to win the next one. But for all of you who just watched it, it is so important to see how the top players are able to withstand the pressure and to create their own chances. Insane play. Fabi leaves. Pragg, like always, arranges his pieces, and we'll be looking for the next encounter of Blitz between them. In this position, Pragg pushed his pawn to d2. Fabiano now played rook b8, which was a mistake. He should have instead gone king e2, and the position is simply winning for him. But rook b8, his idea was to give a check from behind, but Pragg instantly went king c7, rook to e8, and now Pragg was winning. He gave rook c1. What beautiful move. He found it with like few seconds on the clock. Fabi tried to somehow trick Pragg, because if you take here, rook takes b2 comes with a check and then you lose the pawn. But Pragg very smartly sidetracked himself. King d7, pawn came to b7, and here was a very important moment, and that moment was to just give a check. Once you give a check here, it's all sorted. The king cannot come closer because of a check. So let's say the king goes to g3, and now I simply take here. I have stopped the pawn and I'm about to queen. So knight d3 check would have done the trick, but instead Pragg queened here, and that was a big mistake. Fabi should now have taken on c1, and he's totally winning, because if queen takes c1, then b8 queen wins, and instead if you give a check here, I go king g3, and this is still winning the game. But Fabi went rook d8 check, and now Pragg could have simply taken here queen and king e7, and the position is still equal and a draw. But instead Pragg went king c6, a very big blunder and the final mistake. And after rook takes rook, check, queen is attacked, he took, in came a check from behind, takes. Now it seemed like it's all over, but in came a fork, king e3, knight takes c1, and now Fabi found f5, which is a nice winning touch, takes, and this very important move g5, so that the black king is outside the pawn this pawn square, so it cannot stop the pawn, and the knight is diagonally one square opposite to the white king, so it cannot easily come into the game, and this pawn will queen. In this way, Fabiano won the game.